I am making this cute little boho Rapunzel inspired dress. So this is my interpretation of Rapunzel, and it's a sew along with me. I'm going to teach you how to make a dress using a pattern that I self-drafted. Follow the link at the end of the video. So first, let's talk about fabric. I chose all cotton. It's really easy to work with, and it's really comfortable. Now, I have already pre-washed and dried. You should always, always, always pre-wash your fabric if it's a wash-at-home fabric. You know, silks and stuff, you may not want to do those, especially if it will become a dry clean only garment. But with cottons, 100% every time, wash and dry beforehand, because if you don't, and you make your garment, the first time you wash and dry it, it will shrink, and it will not shrink cohesively. So you could have like weird armholes or an interesting neckline. So to set yourself up for success, you need to wash and dry all fabric. What I do when working with cotton is I make sure that my top and bottom edges are straight. When they cut it at the fabric store, it is not always cut on grain. Now, if you think about cotton, if you look really close, it looks woven. So there are threads going horizontal and vertical. And if this wasn't completely straight and you placed your pattern on the straight edge, it would skew your garment. Have you ever had a shirt where like the side seam kept like ending up like this, and you're like, what the heck is going on? Why does it keep turning? It's because when they cut out the fabric, it was not cut straight on the grain. You want it straight, vertical, and horizontal so that you can cut out your pattern and it will lay on your body perfectly straight. So the best way to cut cotton is you take your fabric and you start by cutting a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch down, and you cut in about that far, 1/2 inch. You're gonna tear it. Now you will be able to tell if your fabric was straight. Do you see how this edge is about 1 inch and this edge was about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch? They don't match! Now I'm going to do it with the rest of it. See, this one wasn't cut on grain either. I have to cut from the other side. Now, I will say this tearing technique you can only do on cotton. It does not work on any other fabric. With the other fabrics, you are just going to have to be extra careful and look at the lines that you're working with to see if it's straight or not. Now I'm going to set out my pattern and cut it. I'm going to cut 2 fronts and 4 backs. Now I'm going to cut out the sleeves. This is a peasant top pattern, and I have marked a curve for a set-in sleeve pattern. So when it comes to doing the very top, I'm going to fold it back and cut it. Next, I'm going to cut out the skirt, and I'm going to measure down 18 inches. I'm going to cut in about 1 inch. So now I'm going to measure 30 inches over. Okay, so now I have the front of my skirt. I'm going to cut an exact replica for the back. The last piece I'm going to cut is the ruffle for the sleeve. I was going to add one to the bottom of the hem, but now that I changed my mind on how I want the skirt to be, I'm not going to add a ruffle on the bottom of the skirt. I'm just going to hem it normally into a high-low skirt. So I'm going to cut a 4-inch long strip for a ruffle. How I measure how much ruffle I need is I take the circumference of the sleeve, which is 14. I'm only going to add a half. So 14 plus 7, 21 inches wide by 4 inches long. Now that I have cut out and prepped all of my fabric and pattern pieces, it's time to sew! First step is I'm going to sew the ruffle onto the sleeve hem. First, I need to gather my ruffles. To gather fabric, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the stitch length. So normally it's at a 2.5. I'm going to bump it up to a 3.5, and I'm going to do 2 rows of stitching. I am going to grab the bobbin thread, which is the bottom thread, and I'm going to gently slide the fabric down to make the gathering. Now we sew! Don't forget to turn your stitch back down to the normal stitch length. Now I'm going to hem the bottom of the sleeve ruffle. Now I am going to put a decorative stitch across the seam. Now I'm going to fold in half and match up the underarm seam. And I'm going to sew along here. Okay, now that I have 2 cute, adorable sleeves, I'm gonna set them aside and I'm gonna start working on the bodices. So let's start with the front. Now, if I'm going to add any embellishment to the bodice, I want to do it before I start sewing anything to it. So I'm going to pull out my pink fabric and I'm going to play with the placement. On Rapunzel's dress, she has a pink center and it crisscrosses. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I do have some extra trim items that I'm going to try and work with and see what I like. Now I'm going to sew down both sides. I decided that I am going to sew across these before I do the other side. Ta-da! So now I'm going to sew the rick-rack down either side. So now that my bodice front is embellished, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the front bodice and the back bodice and I'm going to join them at the shoulder seam. Then I'm going to sew it, press them flat, and then open it up and press those seams open. So the neckline is curved, and in order to maintain that curve and not have it like be stretched out, what I'm gonna do is stay stitch in the collar. So before I sew anything together, I'm going to do a length. I'm gonna increase to 3.5 like I did in the gathering stitch, just so that I have a stitch that will keep the fabric from stretching. Now I'm gonna repeat the process with the lining. Now that I have my main bodice and my lining sewed together, what I'm going to do is put right sides together, line up my neck, and I'm going to sew it together. Then I'm going to sew back center. Now when you're sewing a neck, you always start in the center and work your way to the outside. So I did 2 different stitches, starting in the center, working out, starting in the center, working out. Next, I am going to take my back pieces and join them under the arm, and do that on the back and the front. So now you can tuck them inside of one another. Do you see that? Now it looks like a wrong side out little vest. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how to make the neckline lay flat. If I were to turn this inside or right side out, the collar would be all bunchy and wouldn't lay flat. And how we get it to lay flat is we take our scissors, and because this is a curve, we're going to cut in 2 to the stitch line, but do not go through it. So up to the stitch line, as close as I can get it, just like that, without cutting the stitch line, because then it would come undone. And you want to go about 1/4 of an inch from each slice, each cut, all the way around. Okay, now I'm going to demonstrate. Before I cut, it stayed in this position, but now, because I cut the little slits, it can lay flat. I'm going to press it, and then I'm going to turn it right side out, and then I'm going to press it again so that the seam is flat. So when I get to this point, I put the bodice on my daughter to make sure that the neck lines up and that the arms feel comfortable. The bodice is essentially done, so let's move on to the arms. I'm turning the bodice inside out, and I have my sleeve right side out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the sleeve into the bodice. So essentially it's right sides together, and then I line it up in the hole and I pin and sew it. Now, this is a lot bigger than the hole, and what you can do is put a running stitch on the top curve and then pull together like we did on the sleeves, or you can just pin it and gather a little bit as you go. Now I'm gonna sew it on. It doesn't fit over my little armhole, so I'm gonna have to set it on top and just move it around. Sleeves are on. Now, I thought it was gonna be a lot thinner right here, and I would like a tighter look, so I'm gonna take skinny elastic and I'm going to follow this seam on the inside and make it a bit tighter. Eek, it's so cute! So the top is done. Now we're gonna start working on the skirt. Now I have 2 pieces of the skirt. One is longer than the other because I decided on a high-low hem. See, my one is longer than the other. First things first, sew down each of the side seams. Go! So now, I want you to line up the side seams. So I have them sandwiched. We are going to work on this high-low seam. So put the shorter part of the skirt towards you and the longer part of the skirt away from you. I want the front part of the skirt to be the same length. So it's not going to curve until we reach the halfway point anyways. So when I get here, I'm going to taper it off. I don't want it to end at the very back, but leave about, it looks like 4 inches from the fold. So 8 inches total. So I'm going to do it, I'm going to start cutting. And you can totally see how the back is longer than the front. Now I'm going to hem the bottom of the skirt. Here we go, the hem is done and I'm going to press it with the iron. Now that my seams are nice and pressed, I'm going to do 2 gathering stitches along the top. That's where you increase your stitch length to 3.5. Grab the bobbin strings and you pull it tight. And what I will do is I will pin the sides and the front and the back to the bodice, and then I will tighten it until it matches up with the bodice circumference exactly. So now that my skirt has been gathered into the bodice, I'm going to sew a seam all the way around. Oh, it's so cute. I love it so much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and clip all of the extra threads. I'm going to press this skirt to bodice seam, and then we're going to work on the back. Okay, so for the back closure of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a button that has a loop on it, and I'm going to sew it to one side, and then I'm going to take a piece of elastic and I'm going to make a loop and I'm going to attach it to the other side, just like this, so that I can go like this very easily. I need a way for this to go on and off very quickly because my daughter changes outfits probably 20 times a day. And the less buttoning and zipping and hooking I can do, the better. Here we go. All done. So now I'm gonna let you in on a little tip. If you want your garment to look super professional, use the iron and press. There are 3 key components to having a good press session. Heat, obviously, pressure, and steam. Especially with cotton, use those more than you think you need it. Don't be afraid of burning it. A lot of us don't use as much heat, pressure, and steam as we should. All right, now everybody go out and make your own Rapunzel dress.